Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Later on this evening, the IRS and the Affordable Care Act, both are moving stories. There are a lot of details. I think of this as a jigsaw puzzle or one of those colorful impressionist paintings that's turned into a jigsaw puzzle to lay out on a card table for a long summer evening. That's the Affordable Care Act. That's the IRS. We have just a few pieces. We put them together, waiting more as they pour out of the box, and we solve it together. So later on tonight, the jigsaw puzzle of the IRS investigation ongoing, criminal flag, and the Affordable Care Act and the tumbling metrics tell us where we are as we approach the October 1st start date. My colleague and co-host, Gordon Chang of Forbes.com, joins me. He's traveling. He's in North America, but not here with me. Good evening, Gordon.
Good evening, John.
We begin with a colleague of ours, Susan Yoshihara, the Senior Vice President for Research for Catholic Family and Human Rights Institute, and we're talking about the one-child policy in China. Gordon, since 1971, I read most recently, this policy has been in place. You have made an argument for some time that this is the tyranny of the regime. How does that work?
This is extremely coercive and extremely intrusive because you're talking about relations between a man and a wife. This is one of the most personal decisions that a family can make about how many children to have. And what they've done is they not only limit the number of children, but they forcibly sterilize women, they forcibly abort women, and some children who are born outside of the plan, in other words, their second children, are actually killed after they're born. This is state-sponsored murder. It's nothing less than that. Susan,
good evening to you. This is a grim statistic, but I read from Ambrose Evans Pritchard's column most recently in The Telegraph from London. Since 1971 and the institution of this program, 336 million abortions, 221 million sterilizations. Right now, the news is in Xinhua that the Family Planning Commission is studying proposals to lift the ban. What is the Family Planning Commission, and what does it mean to lift the ban? Does it mean that we'll get those people back? Good evening to you, Susan.
Good evening to you, and unfortunately we'll never get those people back. That is a sad fact because it's led to not just these horrible human rights abuses, some 60 million missing girls, missing women in China, but also now this demographic crisis. You know, for decades, Beijing has thought that fewer people would make them more prosperous, and it turns out that the opposite is true. But the report is also being picked up in the Chinese media, and it's already been commented on by some officials, so I think it's a rumor that's taken on a life, and it does look like they're studying it. Reports say it could be a two-step plan. First, that would be to institute what they call a dandu policy. That means that if just one of the couple has no siblings, is an only child, then that couple could then have two children. The policy now is that both the husband and wife would have to be only children. And then the second part of that plan, sometime they say maybe around 2016, they would institute a two-child policy. Now, that would be a pretty big change, but that's what's being reported pretty much consistently.
And Susan, who enforces that head counting? Are you an only child? Did you have a brother or sister? Is that the state that counts?
It is. In fact, I just returned from Beijing not long ago, and I have to say this policy seeps into everyone's life there. Well, first of all, you have to have permission to marry. And this is one reason we should be a bit skeptical. You know, the average age of having a child is much older because you have to get permission to get married first, and you have to be older to do that, and then you have to get permission and register. So, you know, when you ask someone if you're having a child and they're planning a family, what they mean is, have they applied, and have they yet gotten permission for it? And the other thing I noticed, that even down to the village level, the population officer, if you will, is one of, in most cases, the foremost powerful people, even down into the villages. So it's a very well-established bureaucracy. And while one of the reasons it is said that this policy is changing is because there's a receding influence of the population officials, especially the old guard, you know, bureaucracies are hard to change, as we know,
right.
And even harder to kill. So there is some reason for skepticism.
Yeah, I'm certain this is a fact, but it does sound like we're rehearsing a Philip K. Dick plot here of a science fiction future in which the state is all powerful to the point of controlling the number of people who are born. Gordon, why are they changing? What is the driving force? And I'm cynical enough to believe anything.
Well, there are a couple things going on here. One of them is that this really is a hated policy, and it doesn't do the Communist Party any good to enforce it. But there's some economic reasons, and that is, first of all, the workforce has started to decline. Probably 2010, according to China's official demographers, 2012, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. To put that in perspective, the workforce, according to official demographers 2-3 years ago, was going to begin to decline in 2016. So we have the acceleration of demographic trends. The country as a whole will probably start to decline sometime this decade before 2020. And, you go back a couple years ago, and the UN statistics, which are basically China's numbers as modified with certain changes, said that the country was going to peak after 2030. Now we know it's going to peak probably before 2020, so we have the acceleration of very adverse demographic trends.
Susan, do they mention the fact that they're an aging population and it's damaging to the economy? Does that come up in Beijing?
Oh, it does. I mean, obviously, they're well aware of the contraction in the workforce, and I think that that's also going to affect any benefits from this. For example, couples are commuter couples now. You might have the wife going back to live with her mom if she doesn't have a job in the city, and their commuter marriages, things that will add stresses to, increasing, hopes for more fertility and that sort of thing. But there's a big awareness, I would say, and Gordon and I have talked about this a lot before, even in the Chinese mindset that they're going to be overtaken by India very soon, that they're peaking faster than they thought they would, that they won't be the world's most populous nation. But a sort of more immediate problem is they have a huge problem with their pension deficit. And the pay-as-you-go system is a disaster. And even if this two-step plan were to take place, Deutsche Bank just released a report yesterday. They estimate that it could give them a bump, an overall bump from a fertility rate, that is, children per woman, of 1.45 up to 1.66. And even then, they estimate it will only bump up the pension deficit by about 4% in 2040, and they won't really see any improvement before then. So it's not going to help this generation much at all. And in other words, it's just too little too late.
Gordon?
Yeah, Susan, it's better that they have a two-child policy than a one-child policy, but it seems to me that any number of restrictions is going to be a human rights violation of the worst sort. So clearly, I think what we have here is maybe them moving in the right direction, but still not removing the controls, which really should be the important thing, right?
Well, exactly right, and this gets down to the problem with bureaucracies. The population establishment is so powerful and invasive. Literally, they know when a woman is pregnant, when she's reached menses, how many children. They also do other things like take care of family planning, maternal health, and that sort of thing. But they are very deeply ingrained in the lives of people. And it, as Gordon said, even if it was a 5-child policy, it would still be a policy telling people how many children they could have. So we don't see much hope of disbanding that. But there are other problems at work here too. For example, are they going to change the policy on when you can get married? Are they going to change? They can't bring back the girls who are gone. When I was in Beijing, I met men who were employed, perfectly nice guys who in their early 20s say, I have no hope of ever finding a wife. So what they've done by killing off the girls is not only killing off the number of workers now, but also the next generations, and they knew that full well going into it. And, I think that the netizens might have had some influence. There's certainly wide publication of these abortions. A woman recently who was almost at term, having to abort, and there are pictures widely distributed. So some of this is a real fear now, I think, in Beijing of public opinion, certainly, and that could also be at play. But I'm not sure that will change the grip that they have yet. If they've got this much control, why give it up, I guess?
Susan, just a grisly detail, I understand. Of the 336 million abortions, dominantly female, is that correct?
That's correct.
Susan Yoshihara, Senior Vice President for Research for Catholic Family and Human Rights Institute. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.